welcome back to another episode of Ag on the Edge. I'm your host, Louise Lampera, and joining us today is Gabe Olmos. Gabe is the president and CEO of Ventura Pacific, a historic and still very currently relevant packing house here in Ventura County. Welcome, Gabe.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I am just thrilled to have a chance to finally get to talk to you. We've seen each other around
Yep.
various
Yep.
events,
Yep.
various meetings.
Yep.
Some email exchanges over issues. But this is the first time you and I have gotten a chance to sit down and actually meet and talk.
I know, it's funny how it works. I mean, it's a small world, especially in ag, and the work you all do is so important to us as well. So I'm glad we're able to do this.
Well, let's learn a little bit about you. You have quite an impressive business background.
Thank you.
Yet there's some ag heritage in there as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
tell us about yourself.
So born and raised in the Central Valley, direct family, so father and mother not involved in ag, but uncles involved in ag, so some farming, some farm management, some running a packing house. So in the Central Valley, you're seeing the bulk of the citrus acreage that I think drives most of the citrus economic piece for California. So you grow up around it. It's just something that is there. And so I was always interested in it, worked in it as I grew up. So in middle school, high school, always worked various farm jobs in the summer whenever I could. Then went to Fresno State, and at Fresno State started an internship at Palm Wonderful. So this is the pomegranate juice company with the nice bottles. The Resnicks own it. So while there, Palm, if I rewind back to then, Palm was, I think, 2 years in existence at that point. So it was really like a startup. So we were just piecing things together. So as an intern for a year, they decided and asked, would you be willing to come on, stay on, complete your degree? That was the requirement, but we want to hire you full time, because there's key pieces here that you're filling for us and we don't want to lose you. And that really just, at that point, I think, just drove me into ag. And I loved the business part of it, and especially the way that then the roll companies, which is what it was called now, the wonderful companies with the Resnicks are ran, very much still ag, but with a business focus, continuous improvement, metric focused, all of that. So then on from there to what was then Paramount Citrus, now Wonderful Citrus. Spent some time in their product management department. Then on to Sinclair Systems, which Sinclair isn't directly ag, but they're adjacent. So the little labels you peel off of apples and bananas that everyone just
the little codes.
they can't stand them. We produce those all over the world. I think we had 70% market share at the time that I left. So I oversaw global operations for them, as well as general management of the North American and Latin American segments of the business. And that gave me a very good worldly perspective, traveling 26, 30 weeks a year, outside the U.S. mostly, but also in the U.S., and then on to Ventura Pacific. And what really drove me here is I wanted to get back directly into ag. I like the excitement of having that season and the harvest and everything else that goes with it. And also, I at that time, we had younger kids, and I thought, all right, slow down a bit. The traveling is a little much, and I'd rather not get divorced if I can avoid that. But it was all of that had been wonderful experiences, and so this is what's kept me focused in ag, if not directly in it, always adjacent to it.
Wow. So a great sort of overview going from almost a corporate but entrepreneurial, with the pomegranate.
Absolutely.
And seeing that get kicked off the ground to then with Sinclair, really a global look, right?
Yep.
Because those
Yep.
stickers are on
Everything.
and used in grocery market inventory, all that kind of stuff.
Yep, absolutely.
Process improvement, and then now bringing all of that then back here. And I know that, under your leadership, there's been a lot of, technology changes, process improvements with Ventura Pacific. But before we get into that, I think, there's certainly for me, and I think many of our listeners, we're very aware that farmers grow things,
Yeah.
right? And that there's a harvest, whatever that may look like.
Yep. Yep.
And then something happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And food's at the grocery store.
Shows up. Yeah.
And so, tell us, what is that something happens?
So you are correct. Farmers grow things, and then there's a middle point in that supply chain for almost any raw ag commodity in which you have to process, package for shipment to a retailer, wholesaler, food service, wherever it was going to go.
With the sticker on it.
With the sticker on it for final consumption or purchase and consumption by the consumer. And we're that middle step. So a packing house essentially works with a grower, and if I'll focus on citrus just for the sake of this, but we work with the grower to determine both the quality and the timing of their harvest. Once we can work out with them how that is going to go, we bring into our facility, which then processes the fruit, applies various cleaning agents and some you call it preservation chemicals, waxes that just hold that fruit in a certain state so that we're able to ship that onto the store with minimal shrink. Obviously, we don't want to see anything go bad in transit or at the store. There's incredible waste in that, and food waste is something we all should be trying to combat. So we make sure that we do our best to get it to the store in its best condition. So we don't handle the direct marketing of that. Some packing houses are vertically integrated, and they've got the processing as well as the marketing. We work with a marketer on it. But to go a little further into it, when we bring fruit in for processing, you have a wash for lemons specifically, which is our sole focus right now. We're starting to venture out into other things. But for lemons, you clean those directly from the field. They then go into cold storage. And lemons, most folks don't know, are picked in, you see a lemon and it's yellow. But they're picked in a range of colors, from dark green to a very bright, high color yellow. We will pick those at any point in time in that range of colors, depending on what the market need is. But if we decide to pick a dark green piece of fruit, that fruit may not turn yellow and marketable and ready to pack for 3 months.
Yeah.
And we'll send that out then to the consumer, completely, totally fresh, ripe, ready to go at that point. But we made a decision at some point to pick it, and instead of leaving it in the elements to get wind beaten, especially in Ventura County, we want to hold it in our cold storage to preserve it for a future use, say when we think the market may be better for the grower.
But you protect it from Santa Ana winds.
Correct. Yeah, these
things
100-mile-per-hour winds that came
Yeah.
through and drove these fires, which were unforeseen. So we, at some point, we bring that fruit back out. It goes to a separate step then, which is our packing step, where again, it's washed, it's sorted, it's graded. We're using equipment in there that is utilizing some of the latest optical technologies to look at the fruit. I think for every piece of fruit that goes through, we're taking somewhere between 12 and 15 pictures of that fruit, then determining size and grade based on the various markers on there and whether or not it's going to be a first grade or a second grade or a juice grade. And then that determines what box it goes into, or if it goes into a bag or a specialty pack. And then it gets palletized, wrapped, ready to go, and into cold storage for shipment. And most of the time we have an order already for it before we're packing it. But there are times we're just putting it in inventory, and at some point we'll call it out and send it to the store. But that's is in sort of a nutshell overview. That's the basic operation of what we're doing every day.
Wow.
About
So
275 million pounds of lemons that
Wow.
we process every year.
here in Ventura County.
In Ventura County. Now, they're coming from all over the state. The bulk
Okay.
is in Ventura County. We even go into Arizona, but the bulk of it still is in Ventura County.
Okay. I think in one of our earlier episodes, Greg Lewis was discussing how farmers will diversify where they grow,
Yeah.
what regions, in order to ensure that continuous supply
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
grocery store.
Correct.
This sounds in the other part of that, right? Other ways of ensuring that continuous supply that we've all come to be used to.
Yep, yep.
So that we're not getting ripe lemons, say, 6 weeks out of the year.
Correct.
We
Correct.
get them year round.
If we chose to wait for all the lemons in Ventura County to turn yellow, you could never process them in time. You would just have a ton of waste in the field.
Right.
Money spent on doing all this for the grower would be lost. So you have to take certain steps, as we're doing, to, and others do as well, to bring in, utilize things like cold storage. That's always been a function when you're looking at how the lemon business has ran. How they did it was different. I think, Ventura Pacific started in 1941. The lease was signed in 1941. We laugh because when you go back to our history, Carl Samuelson and John Davies signed the lease in July, I believe, of 1941. So that's 6 months before the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And so we tell folks that Ventura Pacific really started in tumultuous times, and that's all we've ever really been through. I think every farmer will tell you every year is different. Very rarely is there just a very smooth and easy year. There's always something that comes up, and the same for the packing houses. So we were born into that, and so we've known how to survive in it. And then during my time, we've had things like COVID and the various
Right.
other issues that have arisen. But when you look at how things were done back then, the facility that we used to reside in before building this new one was a circa 1936 building that there was a cold storage or a way to cool down lemons that were brought in and store them using the ocean breeze. So the windows that were built in there they would open them every day, let that ocean breeze come in, close them at night, and then lock that in. And that's before mechanized or any other cooling. That's how they did it.
Wow. Wow. So really using the landscape, the topography, the local climate.
Absolutely. That's why lemons have always thrived in Ventura County.
Okay.
The
Well, that
climate
makes
is
sense.
conducive to it.
And I think, what you're describing also highlights, what we've been, really trying to show through this podcast, which is agriculture is more than cultivation.
Yeah.
Without packing houses, without the services you provide, and the ability for cold storage, the ability to clean, all the cultivation in the world won't survive.
Correct.
So,
It won't.
yeah.
No, there is a lot that goes into ag that most don't recognize. And I can't say they should. It's our job to educate people on how this thing works so that you understand that ag is really about people. And there's a lot of people. I think the last report I saw is California. The California citrus industry employs some 25,000 people full-time.
Wow, that's
Doesn't
significant.
count seasonal, so full-time. And so you're looking at that saying that's a significant chunk of the workforce. The economy, the farm gate value is $2.6 billion, I think was the last report. This is definitely an economic driver for California. And the people that rely on it, and typically the communities that we serve are those that have been historically underserved. And I think folks see that as there's just the farmer, but no, the farmer is one piece, and there's everyone else that goes into that relies on what that farmer's doing. So it's important to lay that landscape out for folks.
And it, like you said, for folks who are establishing themselves here in the United States or in Ventura County, these jobs also offer an opportunity for some upward mobility as
Absolutely.
well, right?
Absolutely.
It's a chance to develop the skills and experience to become a foreman,
Yep.
which is better pay,
Yep.
which then helps your entire family
Correct.
improve their circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
all of that plays into a stronger and healthier Ventura County as a whole.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and I know that there's some challenges that in Ventura County we have land use ordinances and
Yeah.
policies, SOAR being one of them, that 100% support cultivation, right? Farmland, preservation of farmland, that is critical, that is essential, but they don't seem to do much to support these other aspects of farming
Yeah.
that are 100% necessary. The
Yeah.
cold storage, the packing house facilities,
Yeah.
and how do we expand those, to provide more stability for our local ag,
Yeah.
for our local farmers, and for that upward mobility.
Yeah, yeah.
So-
I mean, when we look at everything we view at Ventura Pacific, so we are a cooperative, so we're grower owned, about 150 grower members, 7,000 acres, the bulk of it in Ventura County, but we're up as far north as the Salinas area. We've got a good chunk of acreage in the Central Valley, in Imperial and Riverside counties, and then even into Yuma, Arizona, if you'll believe that.
Wow.
And when you look at so we view everything from the lens of the grower. And our growers need to make some money to make sure that they continue to grow this product, as
Right.
any growers do. And that helps to create those opportunities for folks to have these jobs, to then have some upward mobility. And what we've seen, at least since COVID, is that the ability for growers specifically on the citrus side, and I'd say more specifically in Ventura County, to make money each year has eroded to the point where we're looking at many growers electing to remove lemon acreage and going with something like avocados, which may bring a higher return per acre. But I point that out to say the risk always becomes when we look at things like you mentioned some regulation in terms of what you can do, your land use regulation. We have regulation that comes from, I'd say mostly the state, but some federal, that tends to compound, and that compounding effect lands solely on the head of the grower. And the question then is, am I making money or not? Should I keep doing this or not? But then it has the downstream effect of, all right, those folks who relied on that job and who were starting to see some success in upward mobility,
Yep.
perhaps that goes away. And those are the things that do keep me up at night when I look at making sure that our workforce can survive, can grow their families, do the things they need to do, and count on us to be there for them because they're giving 100% every day. Some of the things are out of our control, but that's the things that we're trying to work with Sacramento and other places on to hopefully get resolved, or at least lighten the load a bit.
Yeah.
Because they're just, when you add things up, I'll give you an example. So Cal Poly completed a study on the cost of food safety specifically and the regulation around food safety. And this was focused to leafy green and veg, but it's not too far off from citrus. And if I recall it correctly off the top of my head, I think from 2010 to 2015, the cost increased somewhere around 1,300%.
1,300%.
1,300%. It's sitting at about $1,100, $1,200 an acre right now, somewhere around there, maybe even a little more. So you're going, okay, where is a grower going to go with this? I mean, how do we look at it? You've now got something that's it's a $1,300 an acre increase.
Mm-hmm.
So you're starting at a point now where you've already got that delta that is strictly regulation that you can't get around, that I'm not going to say is all bad, but I got to imagine that food hasn't gotten more dangerous over the past 15 years.
Or since millennia started when we first.
So, and when you look at this, you say, right, how do we control some of this so that we're not? I think there may be one good thing that happens, and then someone comes in with something else, and then this is the compounding effect that you start to see that occurs in the field and largely ends up at the grower's doorstep. And then the question becomes, do I keep doing this? And
Yeah.
why do I keep doing this?
And I think, again, that compounding effect, I think Cal Poly just released an update
Yep.
to that study this past January,
Yep.
I think, right? Which showed on top of that original increase, since that time, it's gone up another almost 2,000%.
There you go.
But yet, if we were to go back and look at, because every year the county ag commissioner produces a crop report where they say, hey, this is the gross revenue brought in by farming in Ventura County, and I stress gross. That number
That is key. It's
has
gross.
remained flat
Yep.
for at least 14 years.
Yeah.
It hovers around $2.1 billion. And that's nothing to, that is significant,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But the fact that it hasn't grown while these costs
They have.
are skyrocketing. And I need to clarify, too, that $2.1 billion is not adjusted for inflation.
Yep, yep,
So,
yeah.
we are looking at, I think, a cost crisis.
We are. So we tell folks we're seeing 1990s prices and 2020's costs right now. And those two things don't mix.
Right.
What people are paying at the grocery store is not what is going back to the grower. So they may feel, even during the inflationary period, that, oh man, these price on a lemon or an orange or an avocado or any of it has gone up significantly, or it hasn't gone down at all. It's stuck at this point. It's not making its way back to the grower, not in any way. They've seen their margins erode over the past, especially 5 years, but most markedly over the past 3. So there is, I'd say again, real concern on how many of these folks decide to keep doing this, especially in a high cost area like Ventura County.
Yeah, yeah. And again, throwing more on to
Yeah,
that
yeah,
compounding,
yeah.
right? There's been other challenges specifically to citrus, including the recent quarantine for HLB, Juan Long Bin.
Long being, yeah, correct. You got it.
So can you tell us about that and what did that do?
Yeah, so the Asian citrus psyllid, which is the pest that carries this disease, and not every Asian citrus psyllid carries it, so you're fighting something that may have it, may not have it, but I'd say for 20 years now, growers in this area, so Florida got it first, and in the U.S., it's been around and moved its way around globally, but Florida got it first. Their orange industry there is devastated, and they're starting to make some comebacks, but it's a shadow of its former self, like 10%,
Wow.
15% of whatever it was before. So you're seeing what that disease can do when it takes hold and you don't react quickly enough. Luckily for California, they saw it early enough in Florida and were able to make moves that they needed to make to keep specifically the Asian citrus psyllid at bay. However, we do now have an HLB quarantine, as it's called, in Ventura County. Thankfully, nothing in California has been found in a commercial grove, only in residential. So
Right.
backyard citrus trees are typically where they're finding most of the HLB positive trees and even psyllids. So what we see and what we believe this continued cost and having to deal with this is going to amount to is, again, further erosion for a grower. We always base everything on a per bin basis, and if I look at what a grower's potential return is this year, it could be somewhere, just the cost of doing that could be somewhere around 10 to 15% of what their overall return is going to be this year.
Of
just to
addressing-
combat that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
So
how
both,
do you combat it?
so they have the grower has multiple sprays that they will do every year to stay in compliance with what the agreed spray schedule should be for ACP. For the specific quarantine zone, there's additional measures you have to take. So for a packing house that's in that quarantine zone, a grower can just move it directly to that packing
crop
house.
to it,
Yeah.
right.
If you're outside the quarantine zone, you then have to spray that block of fruit. So you're spraying it with a chemical to kill the pest before you pick it and move it. That in itself is adding somewhere around $5 a bin. So I'd tell you it's $200 an acre roughly that it adds an additional cost every time we're doing this. So if you pick it 3 times, you're looking at $600
Right.
an acre in additional cost. So that doesn't count the sprays they're doing on their own to help combat the citrus psyllid. We need to do this to keep this thing at bay, or else the devastation could be much greater. But those are things still that we say the grower is feeling that, and can you continue to keep that up? And are there other ways? And I think they're looking for other ways to try to mitigate it without having to use sprays, say, but everything costs money.
Yep. And everything, is going to come with a little bit of what do we do now?
Yep,
right?
correct.
Which is definitely not contributing to confidence in, oh, hey, I'll plant more lemons. Hey,
No,
right.
no.
And I think too that also highlights the critical role that the packing houses play, and because once the lemons get to you, the spread of the disease can be controlled by the cleaning process, right?
Correct.
That you go through.
Correct, yeah.
So
Yeah.
so
We can, if that's an option, but if you're outside of the quarantine, you have to
you have to spray on
treat it.
top of going through that
Correct,
cleaning
yeah.
process.
Yeah, so most folks say, we'll just send the product to the packing houses in the quarantine. It doesn't work. There typically is capacity constraints, and so you're going to have to move some out. And so unfortunately, at some point, a grower somewhere is going to have to feel that cost.
Right, right, okay. So we've got that additional cost
Yeah.
and concern, which I know is keeping a lot of citrus growers up at night. Very interesting that it's only hitting residential trees, but yet our commercial farmers are the ones footing the bill.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, I would say, if I can make a controversial statement, we should remove residential citrus trees, especially within Ventura County. Now that we have an HLB fine, that shouldn't be allowed to continue. You're putting at risk, as you mentioned, the value of just what you mentioned overall ag. We'd have to go into what the citrus crop. I think the last time I looked at lemons in Ventura County in the report of somewhere around 300 million, something like that. But, again, I could
Yeah.
be off on it. But point is, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I understand the desire, and you're in Southern California, and you'd love to just have a tree in your backyard that you go pick. But there now is this disease that has the real potential to devastate this entire industry. And is that worth it? I don't think it is.
It? Yeah. I guess that's like you said, it's a controversial statement, but at the heart of it is Ventura County residents have time and again declared their love and support of local agriculture. Are you willing to show that love and support? I guess is the, question behind that.
And perhaps many are not aware
Right,
of what's
right.
going on. But I think it starts with the nurseries, the Costco's, the Home Depots, the Lowe's. Should we still be sending out citrus trees when we know we have this issue here, especially in Ventura County? You start at the source, and then that starts to send the message that we can't continue it. Right now, when there's a find in a grower's backyard, the tree gets removed, but that doesn't mean they can't put another one back in.
Right.
They're allowed to.
Right.
So we're exacerbating this issue to the point in places in Orange County, they've just given up removing trees because they had enough fines in residential areas that it's not cost effective to keep doing this because they just keep popping up.
Wow. And I know another, complicating factor for that is, one of the things that people love about living here is sharing
Yeah.
the bounty with our friends and relatives who can't grow a citrus tree in their backyard.
Yeah.
Or whatever it may be. And so you go to grandma's house
Yeah.
for a barbecue or a holiday weekend, and before you leave she says, hey, grab some lemons,
Yeah.
not thinking that could be a huge vector for spreading
Absolutely.
a disease.
Yeah.
And increasing the quarantine area, devastating more crops and commercial farming.
You were able to buy citrus and I believe even some plants online, and it could be
Wow.
shipped into California. Now they've put a stop, or at least found a
Okay.
way to make that a little safer. But those are things that you just say, right, we have to reconsider how we've always done things,
Right.
given the new state of affairs here.
Yeah, wow. That's a lot to think about.
Yeah, it is.
So, and then let's throw more to think about on top of it, right? Is farming's global
Yep.
now, and that has implications as well. And it's maybe 4 or 5 years ago where the lemon market crashed here in Ventura County.
Yep.
And that was because of change in trade agreements
Correct.
with Argentina. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so in the first Trump administration, began in the Obama administration, but carried on into the Trump administration, and finalized and approved there. the Argentinian lemon market or industry had made a strong push for years. I recall this when I was at Paramount Citrus, and there was a desire then to make sure that we kept these folks at bay, just given that Argentina, in specifically their Tucumán region, is the largest lemon growing region in the entire world. Mostly serves Coca-Cola, mostly for lemon oils, but they do have a fresh segment of it. Obviously, the U.S. is an attractive market. So Argentina comes in, gets limited access for the first couple of years. So it feels okay. Like, all right, maybe we can, not ideal, because at that point we already had Chile coming in, Mexico. You throw Argentina on, all right, now we've got more. But in moderate volumes and with pricing that somewhat matched what we were doing in domestically, okay, it was fine. Last year alone, so the original economic analysis of this to gain approval and entry into the U.S. said Argentina would average about 18,000 metric tons a year.
Okay.
This past year, they did 90,000 metric tons into the U.S. So that tells you the analysis that was originally done is completely flawed.
Very flawed,
It
yes.
doesn't matter anymore. And this is, if not the single most contributing factor, it is definitely number 2 on the list of why specifically the lemon growers in Ventura County are making little to no money now. That typically what would happen is as we got into the summer season where you're seeing a lot of lemonade and different other things and usage of lemons, Ventura County growers benefited just given the fact that supply started to dwindle. They then had preference in the market. Theirs was typically the only lemon available outside of some Chilean imports. Then you get Mexico coming in August, but from May through July it was really them, and even most of August as Mexico would start slowly.
So they got that coveted 4th of July.
It was right in
lemonade
there,
market,
and you
right?
knew prices would go up. It wasn't going up to a point where you felt this thing so much, especially at the store level, that you would say, all right, what's happening with lemons? There must be a major shortage. This was just the natural progression of things. Now you bring in Argentina to the degree that they've come in these past couple of years, prices get devastated. So there is really no lift in the summer, stays flat. Some cases it even goes down.
Wow.
And the cost for growers in the summertime to move fruit from West Coast to East Coast for transport to the store, shipment out of a forward warehouse there, typically in the summer sometimes triples. And the cost for Argentina to get it by boat to the East Coast is probably half, maybe even, probably 2/3 of what we're paying to get it to the East Coast on land versus what they can. So landed, they're hitting it with a much more competitive price than we can. Now, I'm sure folks would say, well, okay, too bad for you guys. Figure out how to do it differently. I would agree. If, again, back to what we talked about before, we weren't being hampered with all this regulation that keeps us uncompetitive, and especially the grower. One thing we didn't talk about was the change in overtime requirements for ag. So going 840 as opposed to being 950, and at times it was different, meaning now that a grower's going to pay after 8 hours for overtime, where it used to be 9 or 9.5 and even 10. That has a significant impact. I think recent studies have shown that the average farm worker has actually lost money after this was passed.
That new law did not improve the situation.
It did not have the intended effect in any way.
It definitely raised the cost because harvest happens when harvest happens.
Correct.
Right, and you have a window that closes rapidly.
Correct.
And you can't, oh, don't worry, we'll work on that report next week. That is not the world of farming.
So when you're competing with a product that's coming from an area that doesn't have similar regulations, it's tough to say, well, you can just compete. It just won't happen. You're going to lose in that scenario. This is why imports become attractive on it. So, I think the elephant in the room for everyone is tariffs and what's happening with that. From the citrus side, specifically the lemon side, we support it. We support it for tariffs on South America, Argentina, Chile. We think that helps to level the playing field a bit. Will they stay on? Who knows? But Right now, we're hearing that there's possibly a more muted Argentinian campaign this year as a result of that.
Okay, well, and I've heard that some of the intent behind what's happening with tariffs is to address the trade imbalance.
Yep.
And it definitely sounds like what was presented in the initial trade deal and the intent is not what's happening now.
Not at all.
all.
Yeah, not at all. So
Yeah.
we are hopeful that that stays. Our industry and through various organizations like the California Citrus Mutual and California Citrus Quality Council, we've contributed comments to trade representatives on where we believe tariffs should be for these countries to maintain competitiveness for domestic growers. So we're hopeful they'll take those into account.
Well, and I think, just from a how it would impact everyone here standpoint, part of, the appeal of Ventura County as a whole is the beautiful citrus groves.
Yep.
Driving through the 126 and seeing them on either side. But because of everything that's going on, all of the cost increases, the challenges, the market, prices and
Yeah,
the like.
yeah.
Like you pointed out, we're seeing citrus groves being ripped out
Yeah.
left and right.
Yeah.
I mean, to be sure to be replaced by something agricultural. But
Probably avocados, and in a lot of these areas, maybe berries you can do in the Oxnard Plain and somewhere like that, depending on the water situation. But avocados, my understanding is there's still a 3-year wait on avocado trees. That's the backlog now. So
and then once you get them, there's a 5-year, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Before they even start producing.
But
So
we can bet every year you're going to see more citrus trees go out and be replaced by avocados. So, or, we're starting to see folks move away just from lemons. I think if you go back 30 years ago, there was much more of a mix of citrus in Ventura County. So you had more oranges, you had grapefruit, you had some limes. And I think we'll see some of that again. If growers were to call me, I recommend Southern California, Valencia, perfect. Comes off in the summer. The market you're serving with that is food service typically. You're less concerned with wind scar, which is obviously an issue out here given the east winds that typically come in. That is going to be a market that I think is attractive going forward. Back to citrus greening, Florida, obviously majorly impacted by it. Brazil as well. So when you're looking at orange juice and where those prices are, futures had gone up on those, just given the fact that production from both those areas has decreased dramatically as a result of citrus greening.
Right.
So there's an
Right.
opportunity there for citrus growers in Ventura County to do something different other than lemons. But I think citrus will continue to play a big part in Ventura County. It just might not be as many lemon acres as it is now.
Okay, it may shift back to, because I know for quite a while Valencias, right, were huge
They were,
here, and
yep.
and you're suggesting that there's the opportunity, especially with how hard Florida got hit,
Yep.
that this might be the window of opportunity to shift back.
We
or at
think
least
so.
consider
We have a couple of growers that are making that change as we speak. What I tell growers, you have the ground, you have the good soil, and you have the water. Especially out here, when you look at things like SGMA, which is the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and essentially means you can't take out of the ground more than what is going in. So you have to say sustainable every year, California mandate. That will impact the Central Valley far more than it impacts Ventura County. There's just a much closer
Right.
level of sustainability as it exists today. And a lot of these water allocations have recently been adjudicated. That wasn't a great thing, but it's now done, and so folks know what they have. So bottom line, ground and water means I can put something there. Now, is it a lemon? It could be in the future again, but if I'm looking at where the opportunity is now, and orange is a great opportunity.
Okay. But then again, also to your point, of how do we compete against another country? I'm guessing they don't have SGMA in Argentina
They do
or
not.
anything like it.
No,
right?
luckily they have a lot of rainfall.
Luckily they
Yeah.
have a lot of rainfall,
Yeah.
but just to the point of, it's a completely different landscape.
Argentina until Javier Milei's election was largely a protectionist, nationalist country. It was tough to get money out. We had that issue at Sinclair, we had a subsidiary in Argentina that we would have to fight to expropriate money that we needed to bring home and do the things we needed to do with. But I think the government's shifted. They've loosened that up now. But you don't have the same thing here, where the state is very much trying to help you, and ag for Argentina is a very important segment for them. It's not as important,
Right.
especially in California. We're not Silicon Valley. We're not flashy. We're not sexy in a lot of ways, but it's an incredibly important industry, and we would just like the state to not seem as though they're always against us in most everything they're doing. Perhaps we can work hand in hand.
Yeah. Well, looking towards the future, I wanna talk a bit about one of the things that when I asked people, who would you like to see on the podcast, your name kept coming up because of all the technological advances and how Ventura Pacific is really shifted from that original, open the windows, get the sea breezes, to really being high tech. You mentioned a few things, but can we talk a little bit more about the technology that you've installed?
Yeah, so when we embarked on it, the start of the conversation when I came into Ventura Pacific in 2017 was, we have this mandated minimum wage increase that we know is going to impact us over time. And I think we've seen it's gone even beyond where folks thought it was going to end. And I'm not going to argue whether that's right or wrong, but I'll say it creates a situation where businesses have to make certain decisions. We were in very much a growth phase and had outgrown our existing facility at the time in the Colonia area of Oxnard. Sadly, it burnt down about a year and a half ago. But those two things really were driving our decision here on, okay, if we want to keep Ventura Pacific, the Ventura Pacific it is today, we have to make a move, which means we're going to have to make an investment to do this. And typically cooperatives are very debt averse. They do not want to bring on any debt. I don't disagree with them in a lot of ways on that. But if we were to survive, we were going to have to. Again, our building was circa 1936. It was difficult to get in and out of there. We had a lot of employees, et cetera, et cetera. But our view when we looked at specifically the automation was, how do we make the job for our employees better every day? Not necessarily easier. I'm not going to say they were overly hard, but easier, make it more give them an efficiency to do their job using a tool that perhaps they didn't have before. And we found that in a few areas. Specifically, when you look at where citrus and how citrus is packaged now, probably any week, 30 to 50% of what we're sending out goes out in a bag. So we had bagging machines at our old facility, but they definitely were out of date. And there were ways that we could automate it a bit more that made it easier for those folks that were working on those bagging machines. So as an example, we had old bagging machines that meant I had to have someone there actually hooking a physical bag to each opening where fruit would fall through, where there was technology out there where they wouldn't have to do that. We could repurpose them elsewhere. So that's one. The grading was probably the biggest thing. We use optical sorters. We were even at the old facility, but the technology had gone so fast and moved so quickly away from what we had previously that we weren't utilizing things like machine learning or what you may call AI now to help recognize some of wind scar, things like that, and make decisions for us that previously we were having to rely on a lot of people to do. So that's helped us create what I'd call a core group of employees that we have year-round. And those were largely the same employees, outside of some that have retired recently, that we had at the old place. What we were aiming to do is say, limit the amount of seasonal employees that we have to bring in. Keep the core, limit the seasonal. And I think we did that through employing some of these technologies that made the job easier for some of our existing employees. Also attracted some new employees that were excited about the technology that we were using, like the optics and the AI, that we could say, right, I found a new defect that came through. We haven't dealt with it before, but instead of us having to figure out how to categorize it, that machine that we were using could go to the database, which was being fed by every other machine that was running citrus that they had employed throughout the U.S. and
Wow.
internationally, and say, oh yeah, we've seen that before, it's this. And the ability to pull up reports and do different things for growers. So we were able to make jobs easier for some of our more seasoned veterans that had been there, and then attract a new wave of younger employees that we hadn't seen previously coming into ag. So those two things really, I think, made us excited about the move.
Wow. So the use of AI.
Yeah,
in-
yeah, even there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And what when you first started talking, I'm envisioning this gigantic robot with like laser eyeballs scanning
Yeah,
as
yeah.
the lemons
Yeah.
go through. But it sounds even, like more high tech than that.
Right.
Because you're taking photos, you're sharing the information. What you're seeing is being shared worldwide.
Yep, correct.
To support the industry as
Yeah.
a whole.
Yeah,
Wow.
so lemons come through, and under each camera as they're going through, we're taking 12 to 15 pictures of each piece of fruit. That's being stored in a database, and then decisions are being made a split second on what's the size, what's the grade. That determines then where that piece of fruit drops on our line and which box it goes into, and we don't have to make any of those calls. The machine does it for us.
Wow. And the standardization, too, of what ends up in each box is probably increased.
Much better. Much better, yeah.
Your premium lemons are truly all getting categorized as premium, and they're, so the farmer is getting the maximum that they could possibly get. It's not reliant on someone who, at 4:30 may be tired.
Right, and we saw a lot of that, where you could find the patterns of where would we have either misgrades, and misgrades work both ways, where you could see good fruit that ended up in a lower grade box and bad fruit that ended up in a higher grade box.
Yeah.
And we try to avoid both those things largely, but bottom line, if we're putting good fruit in a lower grade box, that costs the grower money. And
Right.
this has significantly decreased that, if not taken it out completely.
Yeah. Well, and poorer fruit in what's labeled as a higher quality box eventually will impact the amounts you can get for contracts.
Absolutely.
Which also impacts the grower
Absolutely.
in a negative way.
Yeah, so if we have poor service levels,
Yeah.
poor arrivals, then customers not going to want to order from us again, and yep,
Exactly.
it's a
So
snowball.
the whole thing goes to support a higher level of economics
Yep,
for
absolutely.
for the farmer. Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, Gabe, I know that we have limited time today, and I definitely want to be respectful of your next commitment. But we're definitely having you come back because there
Absolutely.
is so much more to talk about. I do have one final closeout
Sure,
question, and that is, what are we not talking about that we need to start talking about?
That's a good question. I think some of the things that we touched on around the regulations, obviously, there's probably not enough talk on that and the compounding effect there, but I think things like sustainability as well, when we're looking at specifically where California is going and the effects of these fires and climate change, and we won't get into the arguments on which side everyone's on that, but I think those things are real. And some of what we're seeing with how the climate has shifted, specifically how we're seeing warmer days out there and through the summer and longer streaks of warmer days, the effect that we're seeing on the trees and the crop is evident. And it's not just in Ventura County. We see this up and down the state of California. So I think that's something to keep an eye on, that
Yeah.
where we believe that, again, we just kind of get lulled into the state of things will always be here and be the same. Mother Nature may have some other plans for us on that. And it may not mean that it's not citrus here. It may mean that we shift into something else. At one point, lima beans really controlled the
Oh,
farm
yeah.
ground in this area. I live in Moore Park. Apricots there were
Yeah.
huge. And now there's not a lima bean or an apricot in sight, outside of just some that may be there for agritourism. But I think that the climate drives some of what we're going to do there. And So environmentally, we need to keep an eye on what's actually been happening and what these trees are showing us is happening in the years to come.
Wow, that is definitely a conversation that I'm going to invite you back and
Yeah.
we will have.
Yeah, for another day. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Well, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Gabe. Really appreciate the time. Thrilled to have the opportunity to finally have a conversation with you. And thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us for another episode of Ag on the Edge. Be sure to like, subscribe, and give us a 5-star review. See you on the next episode.